Hey Internet, today we're going to be looking at horizontal music transitions in game audio implementation. So moving from, say, one section or part or phrase of a piece of music to another, or how do we move between two completely different pieces of music? How do we implement that, make it musical, make it seamless, and control it in the way to achieve the experience that we want most? I've downloaded the materials put out by Audio Kinetic, so let's walk through some of those lessons together. All right, let's take a look at creating horizontal transitions using the interactive music hierarchy and system within Wwise. Quick reminder that all of the material that I'm going through has been put out by Audio Kinetic, which is the company that developed Wwise. It's available to anyone if you'd like to go through these lessons yourself. I will put a link to all of that stuff in the description of this video. But when you get into lesson 6 for music, this is what it's going to open up with. So first thing, as always when we're doing music stuff, is to change the layout to the interactive music layout so we can see what we're doing. First thing we want to do is select all of the different music playlists, playlist containers, that we want to be able to switch between. So I'm going to select all of these here: Boss, Combat, Death, Explore, Story, Victory, and select a new parent and go with Music Switch Container. And we'll just call this Gameplay Music Switch Container. And now within that are all of our different music playlists. After we have everything within our Music Switch Container, we need to select each of these individual playlists and go into the general settings and tell it to override the parent. Right now, Wwise is essentially mandating to all of the contents of this container that they must adhere to the tempo and time signature settings of the Music Switch Container, which many times saves you a lot of time when you're putting a lot of different pieces together. In this case, though, all of these have different tempos and time signatures, like Boss is 155 as opposed to Combat, which is 138, so on and so forth. So just make sure you go through, select each of the individual playlist containers, and hit that override parent button. All right, the first transition we'll work on is when we are going from gameplay when we are alive to when we are dead, when we die. So I'm going to select my Music Switch Container here, and then look at the Music Switch Container Association Editor right here in the middle of the screen. I'm going to select this, I'm going to go to State Groups and select Player Life. So whenever our player is alive, the current state of player life is obviously alive, and when our player dies, the state then changes to dead. And so we're going to tell this Music Switch Container, hey, when the state is alive, do this. When the state is dead, do this. So I'm going to select alive here. And for general gameplay, we're going to go with explore, right? And then I'm going to select dead. Change that to death. All right, so now if I play my Music Switch Container, what it will essentially do is only play one of its contents, and it will play one of its contents solely based on what the value is for player life. So down here, you can see I have Music Switch Container selected, and under states, we have dead. So if I just hit play right now, we should hear the death music. Cool, as opposed to when the player life state is set to alive. All right, fantastic. So right now when the player is alive, we're going to hear our explore music, and when the player is dead, we're going to hear our death music. But all it's doing right now is it's only changing the music that plays when we first activate or use that Music Switch Container. You'll notice if I play the Music Switch Container while the player life state is alive and then change it to death, it's going to take a while before we actually hear the death music play. All right, and I won't let that play any further. The reason why is because the transitions for all of this default to exiting the source or what you're currently playing at the exit cue. So there were a number of seconds still left even after what I played before we would reach that exit cue and change to the death music. And if the point of this is to have an immediate reaction of the music to the player dying, we've lost that. It's not going to be effective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a transition that says when we go from anything to death, so whenever the player dies, we want it to transition this way. And instead of it exiting the source at exit cue, I'm going to make it immediate. And so it'll exit immediately and then sync to the beginning of the next portion of music that we want it to play. So let's test out how it works now. All right, fantastic, much better. As soon as the player dies, we hear that immediate shift in the music, and it has impact. It actually helps the movement and the feel of the gameplay experience there. Another thing to keep in mind is that the death music itself is relatively short, and so it would be best to have the entire death music play out and hear the entire reverb tail decay before we go back into whatever our regular gameplay music is at that moment. So I'm also going to create another transition that when we go from death to anything else, that we allow it to exit source at the exit cue, so it will actually change from death to whatever its destination is when it reaches the end of the death music there. And then it will start at the beginning of whatever our next piece of music is. The next part of this, however, is planning for the fact that there are a lot of different variances within the gameplay itself, and that we have all of these musical options over here to go along with them. Right now, the music switch container is only being controlled by whatever the value of player life is, so you can hear one thing when you're alive and one thing when you're dead. To make it that much better and ebb and flow with the gameplay experience some more, we're going to create another state with a lot of the different gameplay possibilities and associate that with our association editor as well. So I'm going to go into Game Syncs, States, Music. I'll create a music gameplay state. And I will name these similar to our music. So boss, combat, explore, story, and also victory. Alright, so now I've created my new music gameplay state. Go back to my music switch container, and now I'm going to associate that state with music switch container itself. So same way with player life, I'm going to select this, go to state groups, music, and then music gameplay state. You'll also notice that now that we've added the association of our music gameplay state to our music switch container, that it has added the asterisk on both of the paths that we created before. And what this essentially means is that it can be anything, it doesn't matter. So it's saying if player life is alive, it doesn't matter what music gameplay state is, we're going to play explore. If the player life state is dead, it doesn't matter what this is, we're going to play dead. And we want to be a lot more specific than that, so let's just get rid of these for now. The next step is to create all of the different possibilities for what player life can equal, what gameplay state can equal, and then tell the music switch container to play a specific playlist based on that path or that series of possibilities. So player life alive and boss, we will tell it to play the boss music. If the player is alive and the gameplay state is combat, we'll use combat. If it's explore, we will use explore. If it's none, let's default that to explore. If it's story, we'll do that. And if it's victory, we will do that. All right, so when we're alive, we have options declared for every possibility. And when we're dead, we're just going to do the same exact thing. So dead, boss. We're going to play death. If it's combat and we die, we want it to immediately go to the death music. And we want it to immediately go to the death music for all of this stuff. So I'm just dragging and dropping all of it. So now, alive boss, alive combat, alive explore, we're playing this music, and then if at any moment or any point we die, we have our death music playing. So, that being said, let's test out how things are at this point. I'm going to do alive and combat, and we'll see how this goes. Alright, so it's working because when we're switching between these different music gameplay states, we are hearing the music change, but you'll notice that it took a long time for us to hear that story music come in, and we were still waiting for the boss music to come in, waiting a bit too long for my taste personally. And here, it's really up to you how you want to approach this, and it comes down to what sort of experience you're trying to create. Right now, since we hadn't created a specific transition or set of instructions for switching between any of these, this default transition of changing from anything to anything was dictating how we're transitioning between all this stuff. And as you see right now, we're exiting our source at our exit queue, and we're entering at our entry queue of our destination, which is why we had to wait so long to hear that story music and why it was taking so long for us to hear boss. Just to give us a more direct ability to test and make sure that our associations are working, I'm going to make this next bar. So let's try this out now. All right, great. So it's staying musical. It's coming in at the next bar. We're switching between them the way that we want. And when we die at any point, we immediately hear the death music. That's fantastic. We can get more specific, though, with some of these interactions. Right now, again, we're not dictating specific transitions between, say, going from explore to boss specifically, but we're using this catch-all of when you change from anything to anything else, and we haven't dictated anything besides that, use this set of rules. One moment that I think is going to be important is going to be going from explore to boss. You're walking through the level, and then you come into this area, and you see the boss in front of you, and it's supposed to have impact of, oh my gosh, it's a huge boss. Crap, crap, crap. I care about this, and the music needs to help get that across. So I'm going to create a new transition, and I'm going to say when we're going from explore to boss, that instead of it happening at the next bar, I want it to happen at the next beat. So now let's try this out. Cool, that's working, but let's say that we want to add even more to that moment before the kick drum comes in and the guitars start screaming and all that cool stuff starts happening. Let's say we want to use the addition of a transition segment. I'm going to use the cymbal swell here that I have in the stingers just to augment that moment when we're going from explore to boss. So in transitions, I'm going to say when going from explore to boss, exit source at next beat, begin the boss music at the entry cue, and use transition segment, and I'm going to just drag and drop my cymbal swell over here. And because I know it's kind of a full mix and there's a lot going on, I'm going to raise the loudness of this to ensure that we can hear it, to make sure that it's working. So now I'm going to go from explore to boss and see if you can hear the cymbal swell as part of the moment before the boss music really kicks in. But great, so we heard that cymbal come in at the same time as the pre-entry for the boss music coming in as well. We can get a lot more detailed in terms of that cymbal swell. Perhaps we just want the cymbal to play by itself, and then the boss music comes in immediately afterwards. Right now I have them coming in together, but if we wanted to enter all of that, that's just playing with these options here, such as play transition pre-entry, fade in, post-exit, fade out, playing with the timing to come to the solution that you're personally looking for. But as a general look at creating horizontal music transitions, this is the basics that you need to know in order to get started and begin to experimenting and creating the results that you personally want. I hope this video has been helpful for folks that are wondering how to implement horizontal musical transitions for their own stuff. If you have an opinion or a question on something, please leave it in the comments. And if you'd like to stay in the loop with Unlock Audio as well as all that music, audio, and implementation goodness, please hit the subscribe button. And thank you so much for watching.